Video sparks fears Hong Kong protesters being loaded on train to China. I think the Nazis also called them re-education camps. There is something so ominous about loading up handcuffed political prisoners on trains. The symbolism is not lost on anyone. China is evil but not stupid. They are surely completely aware of the symbolism and seeing if they can get away with pushing the limits, while the world is scared to confront them for petty economic reasons. I'm 100% for fucking them economically. I don't care what effect it has on us. We'll get over it. 100%. I'll pay double for goods produced in the USA and buy less crap. You can start doing that today with 90% of products. It's harder with electronics, but not entirely impossible. Don't be afraid of supporting allies in the region as well. Japan, South Korea, Taiwan. Yep, Vietnam, Thailand, Taiwan, Indonesia, Bangladesh, all valid options for cheap shit over China. Point might want to aviate Vietnam. Heard that to get around the US trade war they build 95% of the product in China then ship to Vietnam to finish and then stick made in Vietnam on it. Lol, goddamn it, of course they would. So tonight was a rather wild night in HK. Thousands of people walked into the streets demanding police stop their siege. And what did police do? They hid in ambulances, allegedly used live ammo and drove 4 fucking buses into crowd. And remember, all these protesters are out to support students. Edit, footage of alleged shooting. Note that this might not be gunshots but rather flashbangs. Thank you for sharing that bus video. Is all this stuff archived somewhere? Facebook is definitely not reliable long term. I uploaded it to it as well, so if anyone goes searching for it, they will find it. Thank God we live in the age of the internet, so that every crime against humanity can be documented and seen by everybody around the world. Sad shit as we see it, but can't stop it. Unfortunately, the political will isn't there yet. It will come. Already we are seeing more and more signs of countries changing tune. The hope is the Hong Kong people can wait that long. I'm just excited to see Australia's, some person in a nice bit of power, but not the leader. He's in their parliament, say he won't back down. He might not live much longer but good for him. Seems they don't need the extradition law, or laws in general after all. Well, of course. They'd prefer to hide behind a facade of legality, but in reality they couldn't care less. Might is right for China in the end, and if they can't rule with love, they'll rule by fear. It's terrifying how 1.3 billion people live under this system and they can't do much about it at all. They support, defend and justify it. 10 nations of 130 million would no more freedom, 100 nations of 13 million even more so. It's quite different when you're born into the regime and that's all you know. Also, they went from the dynasties to civil war and communism. China as a country never experienced freedom before, so they have nothing to compare from the old. It's a bit more complex when a regime lasts this long. I work with a lot of Chinese mainlanders at my job in America and it's quite disturbing how loyal they still seem to be towards the Chinese government. These are quite intelligent people too, scientists and engineers, and yet hearing them talk about how the HK protesters are irrational makes my head spin. Think of it like Republicans trying to persuade blacks to vote for them. Let's say they reformed. There's still a huge lag between that and blacks willing to change to vote for them. Mainland Chinese attitudes over what the West did to us are set in a similar fashion. They are constantly reinforced by education, TV, etc. We are seriously in the 1930s with robots, heading towards the 1940s now. The freedom fort is ahead. Last time we had a 40s, my grandfather's people were nearly wiped off the map. Not looking forward to it at all. The German government back then wasn't a fluke. People like to think Nazis were the big bad, but really, they were just a symptom of a much bigger issue. What they did to gay people, Romanians, Jews, etc. is not unique to Germany. It's a problem that still persists today. Never again my ass. Never again may only apply to the Germans, unfortunately. Fascism was far more in line with historical standards than we like to think. It was a fluke in Western Europe in the mid-20th century, nothing more. Free liberal democracy is a historical fluke, and we are watching it slowly circle the drain as it flounders in the wake of vast increases of inequality and new powerful technologies of public surveillance and manipulation. Those techs work really well for fascists, though. Sadly, yes, democracy as we know it is, as far as we can tell, a fluke. Try to preserve it, and enjoy it while you can. Hoping the people throwing things onto the track will escalate to removing sections of rails. It'll be more effective at stopping/slowing down the exfiltration of these poor students. At what point does the rest of the world finally stop enabling this bullshit? Maybe when we form up again after the apocalypse we will govern fairly. Only after Maximum kills the big bad of the region and leaves the people ambiguously free. Actually, after Immortan Joe was killed, the masses swarmed his reservoirs and depleted them within 3 days. Most of the water was allowed to fall wasted on the ground, where it helped no one. Much of the rest was hoarded by a handful of the stronger and more capable peasants. Moral freedom is not the necessary and inescapable consequence of a tyrant's removal. Musical moral freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose. I miss music with actual meaning. We may never hear it again. The Eastern world, it is exploding, violence flares and bodies are floating. There is something happening here, what it is not exactly clear. This generation needs some decent protest tunes at least. Anyone who defends China at this point is paid, blind, or evil. Sometimes all three. At Donald Trump. He defends China. He's certainly spoken in approval of their handling of Tiananmen Square. And of instituting Xi's dictator for life. China just guaranteed that not a single HK protester will go peacefully. They will all fight to the death. That's what they want. Civil war. Gives them a justification to get rid of pesky democratic people. But they're already getting rid of them. Quicker. Also gives them more cover to go after sympathizers within the mainland. It's a civil war, so we are not just keeping it to Hong Kong anymore. The anti-communist rats must be expunged from all parts of China, something like that. Nothing is going to be done about it. The world will watch, and sit and innocents will die. I hate this. I hate this. We've been saying this was going to happen for months and no one did anything about it. I feel sick to my stomach. The sheer injustice and powerlessness I feel is beyond upsetting. We live in such a cruel world. Many of us feel the same way. We need protests here in the US to make our representatives do something. Anything. Problem is your representatives don't really represent you. They represent the big corporations that love to make money off cheap Chinese labor. And human rights and democracy are both awkward for those corporations. Thing is, protests work. And there are plenty of politicians in the US Congress who aren't beholden to big businesses and who actually make it a point to not accept money from them. Will every politician speak out? Definitely not, but there are many who will if their constituents ask them to. I fully agree we should support those politicians who actually want to serve the people, all the people. And protest, and keep protesting. Well, that sounds familiar. My grandfather was a resistance fighter in WWII. Being the son of a prominent local industrialist ultimately didn't save him from being loaded into a train to Germany. When the train slowed down as it went through the rail hub of Châlons-en-Champagne, he and some other folks loosened some floorboards. The plan was to drop down to the slow-moving rails below, and once the end of the train passed overhead, run off. The risk, of course, was that Nazis had guards at the end of the train to shoot at any prisoners who attempted this. Faced with the uncertain risk of wherever they were sent to versus the certain risk of getting shot at, most people in the train car chose not to follow through. My grandfather, and, at least, one other guy did go for it. Sure enough, there were guards. My grandfather managed to escape the shots, but the other guy wasn't so lucky and a bullet grazed his head. My grandfather carried him forward and over the river, and they managed to escape and survive. They remained friends for the rest of their lives. His friend did have a dent in his skull when I met him. I don't know what became of the rest of the prisoners on the train. I think they were sent to work camps, not concentration camps. China is the most successful fascist state because it convinced the world it would only beat up its own citizens and make cheap shit for everyone else and stay politically neutral in doing so on the international front. They were just buying time. Time to brainwash their people and time for the world not to care. Next 5-year plan begins by taking Taiwan back.